Hi guys, welcome to the Katie Halper Show. On this episode, I have a special guest co-host, Jesse Meyerson, an organizer and writer in New York City. And we will be talking to Becky Bond about how to organize against Trump effectively in a way that somehow neoliberal Democrats can't really grasp or get their heads around. We also offer some great bonus content, and that is reading and discussing some tweets by Sally Albright, the Twitter personality and Bernie basher par excellence. And we also analyze some statements by Jen Palmieri, who was the former communications director for the Hillary Clinton campaign. And you may actually have your head explode when you hear what she said. We'll also bring you in our bonus content the best and worst tweets of the week. So you're definitely going to want to join at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. And we talk about the race between Keith Ellison and Tom Perez and why it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever for any Democrats to be supporting Tom Perez. It's not even him. It's just about the way it works politically, and it's a terrible PR decision and terrible optics. And if you want to win elections, you shouldn't do it. And you know what, guys? We have an extra bonus that we're giving to everyone. I was going to offer as bonus content an extra interview I did with Sarah Jaffe, the journalist and author who we had on our live audience show a few weeks ago. But here's the deal. I interviewed Sarah Jaffe on her thoughts about the Perez-Ellison race and about other things, and it was going to be extra bonus content only for our Patreon supporters. But because the Keith Ellison-Tom Perez race is so relevant and is coming up, I decided something that everyone should be able to listen to, even if you are not a $5 a month Patreon supporter. So make sure you stay tuned till the end, and I throw that out there. Thanks. Bye. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Katie Halper Show. We are so excited. Today we have calling in, Becky Bond, a repeat offender on the Katie Halper Show, one of the most frequently booked guests. Becky is the former head of the former political director of Credo, and she was also a senior organizer for the Bernie Sanders for President campaign. And she wrote the book Rules for Revolutionaries: How Big Organizing Can Change Everything with her co-partner in crime, organizing crime, Zach Exley. Gabe Pacheco is not here, but we have with us a wonderful, wonderful co-host, Jesse A. Meyerson, who is a writer and organizer from New York City, as in born and raised here, people like me, like Katie Halper. None of this, I was here on September 11th. I've been here for 15 years. Doesn't matter. Unless you're from another country, in which case you're expedited. You come from the Dominican Republic, you come from Poland, you become a New Yorker way faster than coming from, Minnesota.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah, Minneapolis. Okay, he knows because he's a New Yorker. And Jesse works for the New York State Nurses Association. So, Becky, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Thanks for calling in. We got to get you back into the city so we can have another face-to-facer. But you guys are an interesting combo because, of course, you guys both have a loving relationship with the nurses.
Becky, you and Zach in your book Rules for Revolutionaries sing the praises of nurses and actually say that no revolutionary movement can merit that description without having nurses involved.
If I can't nurse, I don't want to be part of the revolution. Is a way to put it.
Well, let's think about it. I mean, do you really? If the nurses aren't on your side, I think most people have had some kind of personal experience with a nurse, and nurses deal with all of the ills of society. And they're always there, and they don't just care about one of the things that's wrong with you. They care about everything in your lives. They really treat the whole person. And if the nurses aren't with you, you've got to think, maybe I've got something wrong. And then you got to look at where the nurses are, and you have to think, I probably should be with them. I think if you use that simple rule in politics, that you'll probably never go wrong.
I like it. So the nurses are like the Northern Star?
Yeah, the weather vane. No, they don't turn
like the indicator species. Yes.
Right.
If there's no nurses, then we're going to hell fast.
And what do you do with the nurses, Jesse?
Oh, I do communications for the New York State Nurses Association. But a lot, the worst stuff that means is dealing with the press and doing press releases and stuff. But the best thing that entails is working with nurses, interviewing them, getting their stories, featuring them. They're just, it's like Becky said, they what they do for a living is care and heal, which are the two best things. They're almost all women, which is the best of the many genders. And a lot of them, at least in New York, are immigrants, which gives them an appreciation. Well, first of all,
they're New Yorkers then.
They're New Yorkers, but a lot of them have come out of countries that have had recent revolutionary movements, and so they have a sort of tenacity about them on as far as politics goes. And yeah, a lot of them work in the public sector and treat people regardless of their income, their documentation status, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's like Becky says, they're a good, solid sort of ethical rock that you can turn to in times when you're confused about what to think.
Nice, I like it. And they don't have God complexes like some doctors do.
That's right.
Yeah, awesome. So Becky, this book that you wrote, Rules for Revolutionaries: How Big Organizing Can Change Everything, is really good. People are talking about it a lot. People are excited about it. They're really liking it. You got great blurbs from Naomi Klein, Nina Turner, Robert Reich, Lucy Flores, Katrina vanden Heuvel. And it's it's not like a tell-all expose about working on the campaign, but it really is a kind of guide for what people can do who were moved by Bernie Sanders' revolution, who are moved by the campaign, by the movement. And you have 21 rules? 22. No. Yeah, 22 rules, right?
Yeah, we started with a lot more, but the editors took a few out.
Yeah.
So we can have that for a special extra credit session.
Right. So what do you think are the kind of the most important rules if you had to do triage? Now, of course, this is exactly what you say not to do. None of this narrow micro-targeting, none of that. But I don't know, what do you think is something that really needs to be applied to where we are right now, especially because you wrote the book before Trump was elected?
Yeah, it was really interesting. Zach and I, we wrote the book in August, and we took 5 weeks before the general the general election, GOTV and organizing. A lot of it really starts after Labor Day, and so we took the first week of September and all of August to write down as many lessons as we could from our time on the campaign, because we knew we needed to get back to work. And this was this sort of crash course in what can other people learn from our experiences on the Bernie Sanders campaign that they can then apply to whatever struggle they're working on, whether they are whether they're fighting for the movement for Black Lives, or whether they're part of the anti-fracking movement, or whether they're part of the immigration movement. What can we share about what we learned that might reinforce things they're already doing and say, yeah, this is the way to keep doing it, or gosh, I've always wanted to try something like that. Look, someone else has done it and it was successful. Now it's my time to try that as well. And I think that there are a set of rules that are in progress, and I think they continue to change, and we're learning from people that are reading the book all the time. But I think one of the most important lessons is the first rule, which is that you don't get a revolution if you don't ask for one. And, what that really challenges people to do is, if you don't go out there and ask for something big, you're never going to get something big. And if you go out and ask for something small, you often get something smaller. But if you ask for something big, you may not get there, but you probably do better than you would have asking for something small. And then also sometimes you actually win. And I think a lot of us have been tired of fighting for things that were not just compromises, but they were compromises on the compromise that we made when we started. And so I think the idea is like, we have some pretty radical problems. And radical problems can only be solved with pretty radical solutions. And so we need to start going out there and asking for the change that we really need to see. Because if we don't start by asking, for the big thing that we really need, then we're never going to get it.
Mm-hmm. And also, it in the book, you indicate that the ask itself has an effect on people. That if something kind of amazing is put before them, they're much likelier to be drawn into it than if something sort of milquetoast is.
Yeah, I mean, people are really smart, and they know things are messed up. And I think we saw a lot of that in this election with a lot of the people that didn't participate in this election because they really didn't feel like that the choices were gonna solve the problems that were the most pressing in their lives. And so people, I think the politicians and the political advocates for the last 20 years, we've been asking people to do increasingly smaller things, to win increasingly smaller things. And what happens is we ask people to do something small, to win something small, like let's say a plastic bag ban, which is an important thing, don't get me wrong, or, we're always trying to get a better bottle bill in places like New York and Massachusetts. And, the problem is that people are just like, that's actually, we're the planet, we're just hurtling towards, the apocalypse. And we actually need to deal with the big issues of climate change and stop fossil fuel extraction. And so the question is what happens though when people ask for small things that are not that relevant to the radical, problems that are coming crashing down on us? Then people are like, well, how's that going to solve the problem? And then they don't participate. But then the professional political people and the politicians, they take that as a sign of the apathy of the people, right? So when we ask for the wrong things and people don't participate, we're like, well, the people are apathetic. The people suck. They don't want to be involved. They're not smart enough to know. But in reality, it's our fault, right? We're asking for the wrong things. But we learned that if we actually ask for something big instead of asking for something small, that more people are likely to participate. So it's one of the things we learned in the primary, and I think a lot of people understand this, but maybe they're not running most of the things in Washington, D.C., is that, people are willing to do, fewer people are willing to do something small to win something small than are willing to do something big to win something big. And I think, that's why when Bernie Sanders told people we needed to create a political revolution, and people thought he was crazy. But then what happened was people were like, yeah, actually, it is going to take a political revolution. It's going to take millions of people to get involved in the system if we're really going to change things. And they're like, but if we did that, we could actually change things. And so it was that call to action, which became the zeitgeist of, the second half of 2015 and the first half of 2016 and really changed politics.
You have some interesting things that you described in the book, in the Why Big Organizing intro. You say, by the end of the 20th century, however, big organizing had been almost completely supplanted by a plodding one-by-one organizing orthodoxy that we call small organizing. The rise of small organizing is a complex story involving the professionalization of politics, attempts by the liberal establishment to channel radical impulses of working-class people and people of color into incrementalist politics, and the ascendancy of a bipartisan technocratic elite in both the Democratic and Republican parties that has been accelerating the concentration of power in the hands of an increasingly small number of mega corporations and institutions. And then a few pages later, you talk about what you were just describing to me and Jesse. You say that the small organizing drives a negative feedback loop where fewer and fewer people participate because the changes promised are too small to be worth anyone's time, leading campaigners in turn to lower their expectations of participation. Even though the campaigners and policymakers are the drivers of this process, they experience it as proof of the apathy of the people. The result is that too many elected officials are basing important decisions not on what would be best for all Americans, but on what they imagine would appeal to a small number of swing voters, usually at the center right of the political debate. So, given that, I wanted to know if you think that the Bernie campaign and the movement kind of convinced anyone who wasn't already with us that big organizing is the way to go.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think since the election of Trump, it's been really wonderful to be with other people who really get this, that we're all in it together, and it's going to take all of us to defeat Trump. And I'm involved in all sorts of projects, some of which I'm involved in for my work, and some of which I'm involved in as a volunteer, where we have people, that were diehard Clinton supporters, that are saying, I'm so glad someone finally asked me to actually step up and take responsibility, for organizing. And that's what big organizing does. And I don't think it's specific to the Bernie Sanders campaign, but big organizing does require that we have a big ask and a big vision. And big organizing, it's big in three ways. It's big because we have a big goal and a big vision that we're going for. It's big because we want to get as many people involved as possible, because it takes a lot of people to do big organizing. And it's also big because we actually ask people if they can to do big things. We let them devote more time and rise above the envelopes, stuffing flag, like a sign waving stage, and manage other volunteers and take charge of whole software platforms, to get things done. So I think that this, right now we do have a huge challenge in front of us, and There's lots of people stepping up, whether they worked on the Bernie Sanders campaign or not. What is amazing is that so many of the people that volunteered for or worked on the Bernie Sanders campaign are starting or involved in a lot of these big organizing efforts because they know how to do it, because they've been involved. They've been given that radical trust to run whole parts of the campaign, and they're welcoming people in, who maybe supported Clinton or maybe weren't involved in the election. And let me just tell you, it's so great. I mean, people are so great and talented, and I think if the volunteers had actually been given charge of organizing in places where the Clinton campaign, wasn't staffed or wasn't involved, that we could have had maybe a different outcome in the election.
Hillary would have won. One thing about big organizing that's exciting to me, and that I think a lot of people are thinking about in the wake of the election, that you sort of alluded to there at the end, which is also the topic of another wonderful book that people should read called Hegemony How To by a great organizer named Jonathan Matthews Smucker from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, is that the movement that will be required to guarantee dignity and freedom for everyone cannot be rooted in educated millennials in New York, San Francisco, Boston, D.C., Philadelphia, and Chicago, or whatever, that it's going to require millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people maybe across the country and in segments of the country in the interior and in the South and in the plains that traditionally leftists in coastal metropolises have sort of written off as potential sources of revolutionary action. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, the necessity to what steps we like New Yorkers like Katie and I who grew up in the left, what steps we would need to take in order to be able to band together with and inspire people throughout the whole country.
Well, I think, first of all, it's so great that, Katie, that you have this show on WBAI in New York that's also available on the internet, and that you take on these topics. And so first of all, it's so great to have conversations that welcome everybody into, what we're talking about, and opening up that discussion and not making assumptions about, who this kind of ideas and this discussion is for.
Right.
Because, when I was on the campaign trail for the Bernie Sanders campaign, it was amazing. No matter where I went, no matter what level of education someone had, people could use oligarchy, correctly in a really complicated sentence. And,
no, actually,
and it
Becky,
was great.
it's oligarchy.
Oligarchy.
There you go, oligarchy.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's spelled
oligarchy.
with an A in Brooklyn.
And I know, and a lot of them couldn't even. There was extra syllables, and the pronunciation was not quite right, but they used it correctly.
Right.
And so I think part of it is that the analysis needs to be sophisticated, right? Because people are really smart. Everywhere I went, people were really smart. And they get it, right? They get that they're being screwed in 1,000 ways, right? By big corporations in the 1%. And so you can't tell them stuff like, hey, the economy's growing. Things are great for the country, right? When they know real wages have been going down for 40 years. And then they get the difference between health insurance regulation and healthcare reform, right? They get that, right? We got health insurance changes. We didn't get healthcare reform. So people are really smart. And I think that that we as organizers, one of the things we have to do is we just have to recognize that we're all peers in this movement together. And that doesn't mean that people don't have different responsibilities and that we don't need to have good management practices and all those things. But it really means that, that there's a lot of work that has to be done, and it has to be done in different places. And we're all in this movement together, and it's going to take so many leaders. And so we have to identify people everywhere to work together. And I think how we present ourselves as peers to people in different places, and we're all working together to produce certain numbers, right? In an election, it's votes. In an advocacy campaign, it may be turning people out or phone calls, or it may be how many people we can get to run for office. But we all have goals. And so, the extent to which we as organizers can get behind central plans that gives everybody, lots of people, a chance to take parts of the work and do them, and then we trust other people to do the work, holding them accountable to the numbers. Then you look at who springs up as leaders, and it's not usually the fancy pants elites. We have this rule on the campaign, which I think is great to take in other kinds of organizing, which is that we really didn't talk that much about the issues. We just talked about the work. And we brought people up into leadership by asking people who wants to get to work, not who wants to lead. And when you ask who wants to lead, you get people that see themselves as leaders or feel like they're educated as a leader. They feel like I'm the best person to talk, and they think leadership is talking. And but if you actually create an organization where what you reward and what you value is how much work we all get done, then you'll just easily find yourself shoulder to shoulder with the most diverse group possible. Of course, this all, presumes that you have a righteous cause that is worth working for, and that includes, racial justice and economic justice, both of which have to be involved to get the best people involved. But I think it's really not as hard. You know what I mean? As a lot of people say, well, it's really hard to get these people involved. And it's like, well, why don't why don't we put out a plan with a bunch of work and invite people to do it? And I can tell you that the people that will rise up into leadership will be an incredibly wonderful and diverse, group of people with lots of women, lots of working class people. It doesn't matter how many jobs people are working; they find time for important work that's going to solve our problems.
So, two things on that related to that. One is, like you said, only people who have who see themselves as very competent, or people who are more educated and more confident will step up to lead. Also, the other downside is that the people who don't think of themselves that way aren't necessarily as educated or as Ivy League educated, will be self-effacing, right? And they won't do it. So then you miss out on all these potentially great organizers. And of course, you don't want a monolith of like white dudes from Ivy League plus Stanford and Wesleyan. And I say
or
that
just whatever, yeah.
But
well, are you a lawyer? Are you a lawyer, Katie?
No, but I always thought I would be, actually. I didn't do it though.
How about you, Jesse?
Nope, just Jewish.
No, that's doctor, not lawyer. But yeah, both of them work. We
had this problem, which we called the "but I'm a lawyer" problem. And so we would go and have these organizing meetings and tell people how they could get to work to help Bernie Sanders get elected. And it was always about running voter contact operations. And there was always this point in the meeting where someone raised their hand. We'd say, here's all the most important stuff to do. And someone raised their hand and say, but I'm a lawyer. Right. And it would be like, I was like, you should make phone calls to voters in Iowa. And they're like, but I'm a lawyer. And then it's like, next question. So we gotta get rid of that.
So were they saying, like, I'm a lawyer, you should use me to
put me to better use than just phone calls.
You should have given them really boring things like notarizing stuff.
Washing of bathrooms.
Yeah, we could robo-signing. We can have them, robo-sign a bunch of fake mortgages. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
But also, related to that question, what do you do about, I just was going to read something. There's this, you just said that people do the work. It doesn't matter how many jobs they have. And I think that's true. But I also think that there's this narrative, for understandable reasons, that when you don't pay for work, you only get a certain demographic, which tends to be the demographic which is more financially stable or secure, right? But can you talk about how true that is and how true that is in the context of organizing?
Yeah, I think that this is a big problem in the progressive movement, where there has been, and for good reasons, like full-time internships, right? The kind of person that can forego any income and work full-time in order to get an entry-level job in a progressive institution, that's exclusionary, right? But requiring someone to quit their job and work for you full-time in order to have leadership in a movement, that's exclusionary too. Right. So like, we had an amazing Latina leader who was working class, she had like 30 years in a public school system. She wasn't going to quit her job, to work 6 months on a campaign. Like, that would have been crazy. Right. But she worked several hours every day and she worked every weekend. And so why would we not allow her to have a leadership position? And the way we dealt with this, and there were lots of people like that. There were construction workers, there were HR professionals, there were, software developers. These are people that are, from all walks of life, right? We had a lot of people that drove for Uber and Lyft that would come and volunteer they would organize their downtime in order to come and work for the campaign. And here's the way we sort of got around the problem of not requiring someone to work full time and quit their job to get a paid, because we paid our interns on the Bernie Sanders campaign, and I believe in paying your interns, right? But we came up with the concept that three to four really qualified, experienced volunteers were committed could do the same work as one full-time person. And this isn't true for every job. You wouldn't want your press spokesperson probably to be a team of 3 or 4 volunteers.
Tag teaming in and out mid-press conference.
But for most sort of like jobs on our part of the campaign, that we could get a team of 3 or 4 people, and they would job share, and they were experienced. And you know what? They had like 3 or 4 experienced people. We had public school teachers. We had people that we literally had some great leaders that came out of the construction trades. And when they're on a team together, like the life experience, their people skills, their understanding of how to make a process work, it was so rich, and it was so much better than paying a 22-year-old, college graduate full time to come, who had no experience to come and work for us. It was far better. And so we built these teams of people, and people said, thank you for letting me, have a way to really contribute. And I was just like, no, thank you for actually, running a big part of the campaign. It was amazing.
And you also say, I wanted to read a couple things that are related in the book. You say, we have to have a meaningful message and big goals. Instead of asking for the change that politicians think is possible, we have to ask for the change that is actually needed to solve problems. This will necessarily be big. And then you write, what do big organizing goals look like? And these are make public college free, end the drug war and stop the mass incarceration of Black and brown people, let everyone enroll in Medicare and make health care truly universal, pursue an industrial policy that seeks to put everyone to work in the best jobs possible. None of these are crazy things to ask for, and it's not crazy to ask for them all at once. In fact, all of those things are the status quo in almost every high and middle income country in the world. Bernie Sanders called for them, and he almost won the presidential primary. Our problems are big, so our solutions must be big. To achieve them, we need a new kind of organizing, and that is big organizing. And you make a kind of an interesting statement. You say big organizing rarely works around a single issue. Our struggles are all interconnected. And so there's that. And then, just to skip ahead a little bit, so we have those big goals, right? Then you also say that you want to see, quote, leaders from movements take power. A protest movement is not successful if it knocks out an establishment only to replace it with a newer, fresher one that holds the same values and agenda as the old one. Some people in our movements believe strongly that we should not take power, that we should simply build stronger and stronger protest movements that will eventually wipe away the very existence of power. We respect that view, but don't share it. We want to see the people take power, and we believe that right now the people are closer than ever to making that happen. So to step back, so you say that there are these radical solutions are required for radically, severe problems. Then you say that these radical solutions, which you support, which Sanders put forward about Medicare, about public college, are totally plausible and feasible. And then you talk about people who are, let's say, who are going to perhaps replace something establishment with another establishment thing. So to me, what this really resonates to me, because in the context of the Trump victory, my fear is that there are people who happen to be the same people who are extremely anti-Trump, and I'm afraid once we do defeat Trump, if we do, we'll reinstate this neoliberal center and centrism that helped create Trump in the first place, and that they are talking still about things like free public college and universal health care. They are calling these ideas crazy and purity politics and pie in the sky. I don't know what to do about that. I mean, I enjoy fighting with them on Twitter, but that's probably not the most productive thing. Unless I can link it to fundraising. If I could pick an organization, right, and like somehow every blank retweets I got, some money would go to it. that would be great. Or I'll be a hit person.
We should figure that out.
Yeah, I'll be a hit woman.
Yeah.
Someone sends me, like I said, a real pavement-pounding organizer who doesn't have time to battle on Twitter sends me the target, the issue, the tweet I have to engage in, and then, that's how I pay it forward. That's how I fight the resistance, run the resistance. But I mean, and Twitter isn't real life, but it is a window, as I like to say, it's a window into where the souls of people would be who run the media or are high up in the media. And this idea still, I mean, you have people saying that there's a range among centrist Democrats, and the range is at best it's kind of like Bernie bashing centrist Democrats, let's say. So you have Bernie criticizing and then Bernie bashing. The Bernie criticizers say, look, I, of course, love the idea of universal health care, but it's not going to happen. And then you have the more egregious versions, the Sally Albrights, if you will.
I will.
Yes, thank you.
You're
and Sally,
welcome.
we wanted to have you on the show. Her thing is like Bernie's a sexist, misogynist, straight white dude, and he has purity politics and is crazy and demanding radical things that Americans will never go for, like universal health care, which gives you universal health. So how do you respond to these people? I mean, how do you as an organizer, what's our jobs? What's everyone's jobs? Like, what's the podcast host job, radio show host job? What's the organizer's job? Are there certain people we can't convert? Like, are there certain people we can't convert and who we just can't work with and we have to crush and, really engage with and humiliate? I know this sounds so not woke, but I really believe, like, look, with Judith Miller, right? She had her credibility taken away from her, and that was just. Yeah. She could have, maybe we could have given her a chance to atone, explain what happened, and then never do it again, and she could have revealed some problems within the media, blah, blah, but barring that, she should have had her credibility taken away. I want the same thing to happen, and it's not just because I enjoy doing it, but there really is a public use of it and public service. We can't have these ideas that things that are doable are radical pie in the sky, because that will bring us back to the status quo that let us have Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I mean, my home state of Tennessee, the governor's just, announced that the Republicans are making community college free for everyone. And, I mean, these are not crazy programs. And I think that these low expectations that the neoliberals keep pushing, on the Democratic Party is really what got us to where we are today. I think it's a big test right now to see whether the people that were involved in losing the presidential campaign to Trump are going to stay in control, of the National Party and going to stay in control of the how most of the big donors, flow their money. I mean, I'll give you an even worse, scenario, which is that, I think there's something even more fundamental even in this moment, which is that a lot of the National Democrats, they're really focused on Trump and all the extremes that Trump is going to. But in reality, this is the entire, Republican, party. All the Republican national, elected officials are just standing shoulder to shoulder with Trump to push this radical agenda. And so we have to not only defeat Trump, but we have to defeat the Republicans, because if we just pull out Trump and end up with Pence and Ryan, it doesn't change the agenda, hardly at all. And so we could have a massive movement moment only to remove Trump, not to get a neoliberal Democrat in charge, but just to get the Republicans back in charge, because we focus so much on Trump being an anomaly, you know what I mean, and this being this crazy, unprecedented, fascist threat. But in reality, we have a hard right Republican Party that's united behind a standard bearer who has, who's a fraud and who's lied, you know what I mean, to get people who voted, to mislead people into voting for him for supposedly populist reasons. But, I think in some ways it comes down to the candidates that run, and we need a narrative that's counter to what we're hearing from the David Brocks and and the rest of the neoliberal sort of like Clinton corner. And when you have someone like Tom Perez running for governor, for the Democratic nomination for governor of Virginia, he's talking about how the Democrats say, he's literally out there saying, look, the Democrats think if we could just message our programs better, people just don't understand that the macroeconomic news is really good, and we just need to explain to them better how our policies are good for them. And the answer is no, that the people, and Tom Perez says this on the trail, that the people are really smart and they get it, that the economy is really fragile and that it's harder for them than ever to get into the middle class. And if they get in the middle class, there's no guarantee that they can stay there. And it's this fragility that's really put a lot of voters up for grabs, and we need to address that along with all of the dog whistle, racial politics that got us to this moment where we are. So, I think that it's going to take the movement, and the movement is standing up. I think it's going to take. I think it's also going to take people running for office and current politicians within the structure to actually fight back. And that's why it's fantastic that Keith Ellison decided to fight to be the leader of the party. I think that's great that Tom Perez decided to, primary the establishment candidate running for governor in Virginia. But we could end up with a lot of establishment, candidates who are not inspiring running for Congress in 2018. And if that happens, it's going to be really hard to take back the House. So candidate recruitment and calling on current politicians to actually be courageous and split with the party is something that we need to do.
So you're co-author on this book, and your partner at the Bernie Sanders campaign, Zach Exley, has, subsequent to the publication of the book, started a project called Brand New Congress, which is supposed to do the very thing that you were just talking about, recruit the sorts of candidates who you said were made good volunteers on the Bernie Sanders campaign, teachers of the year and people who are sort of leaders in their community, but perhaps political novices. When I saw that he was doing that, it resonated very strongly with your book and with the emphasis on making big demands and having big projects, brand new Congress, every single one. When you talk about working the numbers, like 100% is a really kind of inspiring number, all of the Congress out and a whole new one in. And you too have started a project based on that 100% number in the wake of this book, which is called Knock Every Door. I wonder if you would talk a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, Jesse, I bet so many, members of your union who would be great in office.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If they would run for office. That would be just amazing. These are people that are really practical, that would ignore the conventional wisdom to actually get out and solve the problems that the people face, right? And that when asked a question, would try and answer it and not equivocate, right? Even if the person doesn't agree with you. And we have so many times where politicians just don't want to, have anyone disagree with them. They twist up their statements in sort of weasel words to the extent that people don't believe them. And who can blame the people, right? That's not a media conspiracy. When people really won't come down and say what their position is on an issue because they're afraid of offending someone, then that creates a dynamic that is part of what got us to where we are today. I think that Donald Trump proved that that maybe anyone can run for office and win and defy the conventional wisdom, right? And we had this, a lot of the ways the presidential race played out was that a bunch of political professionals had this idea about electability. Right, and a lot of people said, I agree with Bernie Sanders, but I don't think he's electable, so I'm not going to support him, even though I agree with him on the issues. And in the end, the person that turned out not to be electable, was not Bernie Sanders. It was Hillary Clinton. Turned out to be the one that wasn't electable, and that's the exact opposite of what the professional conventional wisdom was. We don't know whether Bernie Sanders was electable or not, but we don't know for sure that he wasn't, right? Because we didn't win the primary, and so he didn't go up in the general election. So
we have a better record.
So I think
than Hillary does.
Yeah. So thinking small has certainly proven not to win, right? And so this idea of thinking big about we should run someone for every office. And we should actually run some unlikely people that the political pros wouldn't pick and help them to run. I think is not such a crazy idea. And it's these ideas. We have to put out a bunch of these ideas and see what inspires people to actually get involved. And the Tea Party certainly ran some unlikely people. They knocked off Eric Cantor in a race that nobody thought that the House Majority Leader could, or sort of the House Whip, was that what he was at the time? Anyway, someone in House Republican leadership could lose. And they knocked him off, with someone who'd never been, in elected office before. So I think we have to throw out these preconceived notions. All the political professionals, pretty much proved, that they didn't know what was going on in this last cycle, and so we shouldn't let them play the same playbook in the next election and expect to win. And this Knock Every Door campaign that I launched as a volunteer with a bunch of other volunteers. The idea behind that is we make all sorts of assumptions about what voters are with us and what voters aren't. We only talk to a small slice of the electorate. in most political campaigns. There's all these people that never vote, and campaigns just don't talk to them. They're like, they never vote. It'll be too hard to get them to vote. We're not going to talk to them at all, right? And it's just like, that's crazy. It's a huge part of the electorate. And if we just mobilized a portion of them to get involved and vote, we could have won. It's the same thing with people that vote with us all the time. If they vote with us all the time, then we're like, you know what I mean? They have nowhere to go. I'm not going to talk to them, right? And then when they vote in lesser numbers because they were ignored, you know what I mean? That hurts too, because those are the people that would have been with us. And so we really need to, get out of our filter bubbles. And Katie, you ask what can a podcast, what can a radio host do? Is, I think, people do need social media and this kind of media to learn about what's happening around them and to learn about what they can do. And what we want to do right now is urge people to actually do things together in person. And Jesse, you're part of a union, and you know how valuable it is for people to get together in person and be together, and how that emboldens people and how much more they can do together, how that brings joy into your life. The struggle is long. We need to form these relationships, and working with people that we don't know and talking to people is really enriching. And so getting people out there, and Knock Every Door allows volunteers anywhere to start a door-to-door canvas on their own where they live, bring together other like-minded people who they may not know, and just start going out knocking on doors and having deep and important conversations with voters that you may not agree with or that may have not been involved in politics. And time after time, when I talk to these people that are going out and doing this Knock Every Door canvases, they just tell me, like, you know what, it's amazing how much people will tell you when you knock on their door and tell you you're there to listen. And I have had the most amazing conversations, and I've learned so many things. And I actually think it's going to be possible to bring together the people we need to defeat Trump if we just start getting out there, talking to people, learning what's really going on in people's lives, and fighting for an agenda that's going to bring all of us, to a better place. And I think that's where that starts.
Yeah. So you're saying knock on doors. So you're saying I should find out where David Brock lives and very unthreateningly just knock on his door, bring some fruitcake, and talk to him about his being what would we say, being not so helpful to the progressive cause.
David, my name's Katie. I'm here to listen to you explain to me why you're so bad at being a political strategist,
and with open ears and open arms. In fact, Nina Turner, we just had her on, who blurbed your book, and we're gonna isn't she
amazing.
She's the best. I know, she's so great. And she said we have to seek to be we have to seek to understand before we seek to be understood. We have to be soft on people, hard on the issues, which I think is a great thing to sing. But she also said that the Democrats, the DNC, need to confess their sins, and there needs to be a healing, and that we have to look back at what happened. Some people at the DNC have to apologize, and then we can move forward.
Yep.
And I do think it's interesting, because it's kind of like, there are different things that are appropriate for different people. So I think that, in some ways, like, I think that there's more potential to convert and reach out to someone who may not be woke and maybe whatever race, but let's say working class, not as educated, they don't know the vernacular, right? And or the nomenclature. Those people, I feel like, are more potentially winnable than people who are super well educated and or super elite and self-interested, right? Like a rich person who's terrible about tax stuff, they probably won't change because they're just self-interested in the short term, right? Someone who's getting screwed by taxes, I think there's more room to reach out to them.
I think it's really about, within the left, it's really the grassroots versus the establishment,
right.
And within the electorate in general, it's really the people who are getting screwed versus the people who are screwing us, and that's not a partisan fight, right? And there are plenty of people, right? It's most Americans who are getting a raw deal today and who are finding their standard of living going down, not up, right? And so it's first of all, we have to admit that a lot of the people in the Democratic Party don't really want to change things because they're on top and they're benefiting from the system as it is. And so I think that expands, the idea when we take off that partisan lens and we start talking about, we start talking about the 1% and the big corporations who are using race in dog whistle politics to divide working class people, working class whites, working class people of color. that we sort of begin to see the shape of, what a movement needs to look like in order to take power. And so I think within that, I think you're right that we shouldn't have assumptions about who is on our side just because they can speak a certain kind of lingo, or they say, "Oh, I'm socially liberal," you know what I mean?
Right.
But I'm fiscally conservative.
Right.
Like, well, what is that? What is that really? Is that really possible?
Right.
If you don't believe that everyone should go to the doctor,
Right.
does that make you socially? Can you be socially liberal?
Right.
You know what I mean? If you're okay with people, not being able to, feed their family when they're working two jobs, right, or afford a safe place to live. I think we've got to throw out that conception, and I think that we can have a bigger tent in the party if we actually stop appeasing some of the people, some of the blue dogs, and some of the center right people who are masquerading as conservative Democrats.
Right. Yeah, I like that. I think that's great. And there's you have any responses to people who mock the idea of free college and say it's totally not doable?
I don't mean to like quote a meme, but it's just like, how come we have all the money in the world that we need to go to every time we need to go to war? You know what I mean? Or sign a new, you know what I mean? Or give billions to defense contractors. We don't have enough money to pay for free college. How come we have the money to pay for mass incarceration? We don't have money to pay for free college. It's just ridiculous, right? That people have been led to believe that it's just a question of priorities,
right? And then the question to me is always like whether the person actually believes that and are just like not good at being critical thinkers, or whether they know that it's not true but fundamentally oppose it ideologically and pretend they do it because it's not pragmatic, which it is, right? So that's always the struggle.
I mean, if the Republicans in Tennessee can make community college free for everyone. Right. I mean, what's going to happen is the Republicans are actually going to pass a couple, what if Donald Trump passed universal health care, man, he'd be in for, and then did all this horrible stuff, he'd be in for 8 years.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And the Democrats are like, we couldn't possibly do that. You know what I mean?
Right, totally. Because that's catering to racists somehow. I don't understand why. But anything that's good basically is catering to racists and sexists. I don't get it because it's actually helping people who are at the receiving end of both of those things. But anyway, and any final words? Oh, sorry, I cut you off. I was going to ask you about the DNC.
Go ahead.
Well, any about the DNC chair race?
Well, I mean.
Can I ask you a specific question about that, Becky?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
My specific question, I see the potential winners as sort of a win-win, and this is what I mean. I think if Ellison becomes the chair, then he will obviously take his expertise and his righteousness and devote DNC resources to organizing initiatives that will help not just the DNC, but also other sort of community organizations and maybe some farther left sort of working families, DSA-style political initiatives, that he'll be really good for the Democratic Party in that way. I think that if Perez becomes the chair, then that has the potential to alienate a really significant number of Sanders voters as just a shorthand for like the non-establishment, non-neoliberal sector of the Democratic Party, and that those people will then likely step up and join those outside organizations, working families, DSA, things like that, that there could be a real kind of Dem exit from that moment, sort of akin to the mobilization that has ensued in the wake of the election, where like the disappointment sort of spurs people's action. So that's maybe it's kind of a rosy thing to think of it as a win-win either way, but I wonder what your take is on that formulation.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just don't know, right? And I think that could be a scenario. I think that here's the thing: is I just don't think no matter who comes out leading the DNC, there's going to be a huge amount of infighting over staffing and resources, and they're broke because no one's been giving any money because they don't know who the leader is. There's going to be a huge amount of money to raise in a short period of time. And so I think that it's going to take months for that to sort itself out about what that's actually going to be. And we can't really wait for months. And so, what I've been telling people is like, let's hope for the best and let's help whoever gets in there, if they put forward an agenda that we agree with, to achieve that. But separate from that, I think we have to go out and do the work and get the work started that we know needs to happen. because it's just not even clear that a Democratic Party that pays lip service to the things that we care about is actually going to be able to move quickly enough to make the change that we need to see in time to make an impact on the 2018 elections. So, I think, that I wish both of the people running for the DNC luck. I think that I'm supporting Ellison for the DNC. I have to say I've been quite disappointed to see the smear campaign against him, where the Clinton campaign and people that supported them really went after the Bernie Sanders campaign with this misconception of Bernie Bros, and then it was a white movement, and then when we have this African American Muslim running for the head of the DNC, then he's smeared as being a black Muslim who couldn't possibly appeal to voters in the Rust Belt. And so I think
an anti-Semite to boot.
And that they actually oppose our ideology. You know what I mean? And it really wasn't about
pragmatism.
And it really wasn't about diversity. It was really about ideology. And so I think that I think that we need a lot of leaders to emerge, and that we need a lot of centers of power to rise up that the DNC is going to need to compete with, right? And if we want the DNC to move towards the kind of organizing that we want to see, they're going to have to see that that's where the money is and that's where the energy is, and they're going to have to basically understand that they need to compete with other entities and co-opt it. So if there was a nurse, if you organize a nurses party or a caregivers party, right, and that starts to then compete with the DNC, and then the DNC has to co-opt what you're doing in order to, make sure that they stay in the lead. I think that would be a huge victory. So I encourage, people to go out and build any kind of party-like structures, that they think will actually capture the zeitgeist of the moment and set a standard. And then I hope the DNC will recalibrate, once we show them where the energy of the people are. But I think we can't assume that any one leader coming in to the DNC is going to be able to fix everything. They're all going to need a lot of organizing efforts happening everywhere, a constellation of efforts, all pointing in the right direction to get this party moving again.
Nice. And I'm going to read, not now, but because we're running out of time and I know you have to go, but I'm going to read for our listeners parts of your book that I wasn't able to read. And I think the Fighting Racism Must Be at the Core chapter is really good. So we'll read that later. And thanks for doing a great job on that. Just final words.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
I love the show.
Oh, thanks, Becky.
I love the show.
We got to get you on in New York and do a live
discussion.
Live taping.
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So everyone, and what's the website of Knock on Every Door?
knockeverydoor.org.
Okay, that's easy. knockeverydoor.org. So David Brock, I'm saying this in not threatening way. I'm coming for you. I'm going to knock on your door and I'm going to bring you a fruitcake or like a Danish or something, and we'll nosh and talk. You too, Sally Albright. Becky Bond, thank you so much. Author of Rules for Revolutionaries: How Big Organizing Can Change Everything, with Zach Exley. Bye, Becky.
Bye. Thank you. Bye, Jesse.
So long.
Wow, what a she. I forgot she and Zach Exley are silver-haired foxes. They both have short gray hair. It's very cute when they're together. Mm-hmm. They're like a cute little duo. I don't know. I mean, Jesse, you're doing the heart. You're really organizing. What do we do about? I just want to read one tweet that I think summarizes everything about the neoliberal threat. Sally Albright. You know who Sally Albright is?
Oh, yeah.
She's on Twitter. She has 20-something thousand followers. She's basically a pathological liar. She has a great, diverse resume. She both worked for Newt Gingrich.
Yeah, she made an exception for her from her Democratic
right, because if there's
devotion.
one person who's like, who reaches across the aisle.
I'm like, all right, fine.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Newt.
It's Newt. He's personally appealing. He's sexy. He left a wife,
great family values.
After, her cancer treatment. He served her with divorce papers. He's racist. He's a big driver of that whole, welfare queen thing. So she worked for him and for Hillary Clinton in 2008. And the scary thing about this woman is that she's comms. Like that's her lane is communications. And I just want to quote one tweet that she did that went really viral. And this is one of the few things that she had the decency to delete, or the awareness to delete. It was all damage control. It's not like she regretted it, recanted it. Income inequality is only a priority for white cis men. The rest of us have bigger problems.
Yeah, I mean, it is weird to suppose that white cis men are on the losing end of income inequality when, of course, white people are wealthier than black, and men are wealthier than women, and cis are wealthier than queer or
Right.
trans, and like U.S. born are wealthier than immigrants. Like obviously, income inequality. Like this was a play that the Clinton campaign made during the primary, which was to say that the line was like, if you regulate Wall Street, if you break up the big banks, is that going to solve racism?
Oh yeah,
And
I wrote about that for Pace.
Which is like, well, it's going to help because obviously Wall Street is a super racist institution. But like, even just beyond that, it's and in that very same remark, she went on to talk about the importance of intersectionality. When obviously what that does is silo issues, where it's like income inequality is separate from
and almost
sexist
mutually
repression,
exclusive.
blah blah blah. Whereas like it seems clear, and I think Sanders could have done a better job of emphasizing this, but obviously his candidacy was premised on this economic inequality being the nexus, the intersection of all of these other hierarchies.
He's 1,000 times more. I mean, there's a video
true.
that's on Facebook today that I shared that ActTV did, and Brad Johnson found the former guest of the show, found the footage of it, and Sanders is talking about racism and economic stuff and how much they intersect and interact. And, again, the Hillary Clinton saying that thing about it not breaking up the banks was a total lie, because it's not like Sanders was like, we're going to break up the banks and that's going to heal all the racial injustice, and we're not going to do any other thank you. I'm going to do all my shows in this voice now. We're not going to do any other, no affirmative action and none of that mishigas. He got a higher rating from the NAACP on affirmative action than Hillary did. So come and show me any policy issue where she's better and like woker than he is, or better on social issues or civil rights, LGBTQ. Because I got to tell you something, he's better than her on all of those.
Of course, yeah, and partly because he has this actual ideology, and as it is, obviously, Wall Street made all these predatory loans specifically to black people, and that the housing crash eliminated the majority of black wealth. Yeah. That's a crazy thing to think about. 53% of black wealth evaporated in this. It's like,
why are you talking about wealth? That's like you're such a vulgar class reductionist. You're such a cis. Guy. Yeah, I know. Your white privilege is what makes you think class is important. So you should go talk to a black person who doesn't have to deal with that.
Who's being evicted and they have bigger problems.
But their bigger problem is, I don't know what, but something.
It's who Sally knows. Sally can speak for those people.
Oh yeah, she knows. She calls them minorities. She's very woke.
So I think that there's the question that you asked is, it's tricky because we have two enemies at the moment. We have bad Democrats and clearly Republicans, but I think that there is a way of treating liberals and mainstream Democrats as being in a temporary alliance with them on defense against the Trump and / Republican agenda, but then simultaneously with that, since we're forming this temporary alliance in opposition, jockeying for hegemony within the opposition, so that once the right is defeated, what is
them?
Yeah, what is the character of the group that's taking over? And actually, I think we're in a good position at the moment. I mean, I think if you look at Indivisibles, which is like a super good popular front way of just like saying no, basic political action toolkit for liberals and leftists to get together, call their congresspeople, whatever it is, do these actions, saying no to the Trump regime, like that's a good way to do that. And simultaneously, there are these initiatives like the ones that I asked Becky about, Democratic Socialists of America and Working Families Party, that are doing good work to advance a different sort of politics from mainstream Democrats, and that getting involved in those, we can sort of do our offensive work at the same time as we're doing the defensive work. We're doing defensive work with liberals against the right, and offensive work against liberals within the opposition coalition. And I think that's a doable thing. I think it's tricky sometimes to figure out, like, do I call this person out? They're sometimes on my side and sometimes not. But
we should just have them stuff envelopes, and we'll do all the kind of mission statement stuff and policy shaping and the demands. And we can tell them, we'll just tell them that we'll give them like a Beyonce videos and Hillary videos loop of those things, and they'll just, so they'll be happy about that. And then no shots fired at Beyonce. I'm just saying, there's an interesting weird.
It'll be a good way to keep right-wing liberals docile while they're licking envelopes or whatever.
Yeah, because actually it is a great thing, because if they don't do that, they'll be problematically rejecting Beyonce, and we can call them out. I think we just figured this out. Am I right? Really? But yeah, I mean, how much does Twitter? I mean, I'm obsessed with the idea that like we have to look at what happened to fix what happens moving forward. And again, some of me, it's just because I can't stand these people, and I wanted them to have to admit that they were wrong. But really, like 90% of the motivation.
Well, that's a real Jewish thing, Like I was actually talking to my aunt,
anyone
who's
who
a
tells
rabbi.
me not to do that isn't anti-Semite.
They're being anti-Semitic. My aunt is a rabbi, and she's a chaplain. She does counseling, and she was telling me about this this conference that she went to, a sort of interfaith conference about making reparation for trauma, and she was saying that Christians are commanded to turn the other cheek, that forgiveness is expected and immediate, but that Jews, we actually require some remorse, and it's our forgiveness is harder won, and that's kind of scripturally based, and I think that's a totally fine thing to need an because the fact is that during the primary, we on the Sanders side were constantly dismissed and derided, and women on the Sanders side were first of all erased, and when they were acknowledged, it was said that they were only there because we men were there and they wanted to pick us, all this stuff.
For dates,
and so all of this was premised on the obvious supremacy of Hillary Clinton as a candidate, and when it's now been revealed what a deficient candidate she was, I think there's a real if the Clinton folks are serious about wanting to bring people together in opposition to Trump, then it's really incumbent upon them to, as you said, sort of account for the dismissiveness, the derisiveness, the single payer is never going to happen, you guys are idiots kind of tone, because you can't just do that and then once your candidate loses, once your candidate fails in all of the ways that you've said she will succeed, then expect us to just move forward and not look ahead, not back, as Obama said when he declined to prosecute torture under the Bush administration.
Yeah, good example.
You sometimes,
because that actually that shapes the agenda moving forward.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it's not, and so you just brought up a good thing. There's some righteousness in having to admit that you made mistakes to kind of earn people's trust.
Yeah.
But it's also to again, I don't want people who say that free college is a crazy idea to think that they were right about it, because they said it before the election, and despite Hillary not winning, they're saying it still. So I feel like there needs to be a re-education of
Lauryn Hill,
of Clinton shells. How do you like that? That's
look
good.
At that.
Oh my God.
Very
okay.
Nice.
Also, by the way, you could see I was chuckling while you were talking, and it's because I actually tweeted out. Can you guys tell me what are the worst neoliberal shill tweets of going around? So to find out the greatest and worst tweets of the week, as well as absurd things said by Sally Albright and Jen Palmieri, please become a Patreon subscriber. But as promised, here is the freebie bonus, which is journalist and author Sarah Jaffe talking about Keith Ellison and Tom Perez.
I think really, part of it's the endless resistance to change is hilarious,
right.
But I think really the heat is in the street right now. It's whoever your representative is, whoever is in charge of the DNC, whoever is in charge of all of the things, and you're about to talk to Becky Bond, who can talk about this more than I can, but people are already organizing whoever, without the DNC.
Right.
People are already knocking on doors and having house parties and having house meetings and creating email lists and making their congresswomen's lives a living hell in both parties, which is as it should be. And so, rather than get wrapped up in the intricacies of party politics, the best thing I would say for people to do is make sure that your member of Congress, whoever they are, whatever they supported in this election, knows that you are going to ruin their lives if they don't actually stand up to Donald Trump.
Right. Yeah. I think that one of the DNC chairs would be more responsive to that stuff, right, in general. But I think you're right that
as we talked about when I was on your show last time, one of the DNC chairs once defended a guy for punching out a Nazi. The other one, I do not know if that ever happened.
Right. Oh, right. So you're agreeing with me. I thought you were going to say something so right, one of them, right. It's to me what's most fascinating about it is how bad the Democrats are not at doing the right moral, ethical thing, but at doing the smart thing. Like if they want people to stay in the party, all these people who feel really disenfranchised and felt like their vote was stolen or felt like there was, disenfranchisement, whatever, which you can agree with or disagree with. The truth is a bunch of people feel that way, like the Bernie people, the Stein people.
Right.
And if these two guys are similar, which only people who like, if they're similar, why don't you give it to the
I ended a guy for punching out a Nazi, but if he did, I would like to know about it.
Well, that's kind of the thing. No one knows enough about him. So when they say there's these both, like Tom, one has been in office and has a record, the other doesn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, you'd think that these people would give an olive branch, but that's not their thing. And so
no, it's not, and it's a symptom of this kind of morbid politics that we have in this country, which thinks that, again, you don't have to go out and talk to people. You just there are two options, and you get to be the one of those that is slightly better, which is basically the Democrats' brand for the last 50 years, slightly better than the other guy. Hey,
right.
At least we're not him. Hey, remember Goldwater? He was nuts.
Right.
That's their brand. Their brand is nothing, but we're not them. And that's a crappy brand. And it's so deeply internalized at this point that, the idea that there might be another person who looks at them and says, well, I'm not her,
Right. Exactly.
and comes from a different direction.
Right.
Or there's somebody is like, this isn't enough anymore. Or the fact that America the Democrats basically just boy who cried wolf to America, right?
Yeah.
They over and over and over, the world will end if you don't vote for us. The world will end if you don't vote for us. The world will end if you don't vote for us. Well, look what happened.
Right.
Everybody said, well, they say that every time and stayed home.
Right.